So, what if all that daydreaming, that forgetfulness, what if it isn't a character flaw at all, but actually the result of a stuck switch in your brain? Today, we are diving deep into the neuroscience behind inattentive ADHD to really understand the silent battle that's happening just under the surface. Let's get right into it.
And that brings us to this central question, right? The one that so many people with this type of ADHD, and frankly, the people around them, struggle with. Is this a lack of motivation? Is it a willpower thing? Or is it something way deeper? A biological process that makes it literally hard for the brain to switch from its own internal thoughts to the demands of the outside world.
And this really gets to the core of the conflict. On the one hand, we have these behavioral labels we just slap on, distracted, unmotivated, lazy. But on the other hand, there's what's actually happening inside the brain, a whole story of neural networks and electrical signals. And for a very long time, there's been this massive gap between those two worlds. Now this gap, researchers actually have a name for it. They call it the ADHD paradox. And it's all about that tension between how we describe the symptoms on the outside and what the brain is actually doing on the inside. See, the official diagnostic manual, the DSM, it's great for giving clinicians these consistent labels so everyone's speaking the same language. But, and this is a big but, what the brain scans are starting to show us is that underneath that one single ADHD label, there are probably a bunch of very different biological things going on.
So to really wrap our heads around what's happening, we got to take a quick tour of the brain's big attention systems. I want you to think of it like a control room in your head, with three key networks that have to work together perfectly for you to focus.
First up, we have the default mode network, or the DMN. The easiest way to think about this one is as your daydream network. This is what's running when you're just chilling out, thinking about your day, worrying about the future, or just letting your mind wander. It's basically your internal monologue.
Then, on the complete opposite side, you've got the Frontoparietal network, or FPN. This is your task mode network. This is the one that lights up when you need to focus on something outside of yourself, like listening to this, doing your taxes, or paying attention to the road. Okay, so if you've got a daydream network and a task network, how does your brain choose which one to use? Well, that's the job of the salience network, the SN. This is the crucial attentional switch. It's like the air traffic controller of your brain, constantly scanning the environment and your own thoughts, deciding what's important, and then telling the brain which mode to be in.
So in a neurotypical brain, this whole process is pretty seamless. It's like a beautiful dance. Your daydream network is humming along, you're thinking your thoughts, then an external task pops up. The salience network spots it and flips the switch. It fires up the task network, and, this part is absolutely critical, it quiets down the daydream network.
But in the inattentive ADHD brain, this elegant process, it breaks down. That switch, it gets jammed.
And this quote right here from the source material is so key to understanding this. It's not a total inability to focus. The real problem, the core issue, is the struggle to get back into focus once your mind has drifted off. It's a problem of re-engagement.
So here's what's happening. The brain gets stuck mid-switch. It tries to turn on the task network to deal with the outside world, but it just can't seem to turn down the volume on that internal monologue. So instead of working in harmony, the two networks end up competing, fighting each other for resources.
And look, this isn't just a nice theory. We have objective electrical evidence for this. EEG studies show this really specific brainwave signature. A signal called P3B, which is basically the brain's pay attention now signal, is weaker. But another signal, the N2, which is tied to stopping yourself from doing something that's often totally normal. So it tells us the problem isn't about hitting the brakes, it's about hitting the gas pedal for focus.
This table really lays it all out. The general model of ADHD, the one we're all familiar with, often points to a problem with inhibition. That's the impulsivity side of things. But this inattentive model we're talking about, it highlights a totally different problem, a deficit in cognitive switching. The trouble is in that DMN-FPN connection. The marker we see is that weak P3B signal, and the behavior it causes is that sustained inattention, that drifting off.
So all this new science has massive real-world implications. I mean, if the underlying mechanism is totally different, then we have to start rethinking how we even diagnose this in the first place.
This whole stuck switch idea exposes some really serious diagnostic blind spots. Because the symptoms are internal, that cognitive drift, that mind wandering, they are so often missed, especially in girls and women who are just less likely to show that classic disruptive, hyperactive behavior. and maybe most importantly, it reframes the entire struggle as neurobiological. It's not about motivation, it's not a character flaw.
And just look at this data. The reality is pretty stark. When you look at females who are diagnosed, the inattentive type is way more common than the hyperactive one. And a huge reason for that is that these quieter, internal symptoms are just so much easier for teachers, parents, and even doctors to miss, leading to years of underdiagnosis.
So, what's the path forward? Well, it looks like it's a two-pronged approach. First, we need to use more objective tools like EEG to get a clearer picture of the biology. And second, we need to adapt our environments with things like coaching and structured focus times to help sync the external world with the brain's internal rhythm.
And this all brings us to what might be the most important takeaway from all this research: the need to move toward a more compassionate form of neuroscience. Because when you look at it this way, everything just clicks. Hyperactivity could be seen as a problem of excessive switching. The brain is jumping from one thing to the next way too fast. And inattention, as we've seen, is a problem of insufficient switching. The brain can't disengage from its internal world. They're just two sides of the same coin, a dysregulation of cognitive timing. And I want to leave you with this last really powerful idea. The research concludes that inattention isn't an empty mind. It's a mind that's misaligned. It's a disconnection between the inner and outer rhythms. And really understanding that, well, it changes everything. It reframes ADHD not as a character flaw, but as a disorder of coherence. And maybe, in studying this, we can all learn to practice the very thing that's so hard for these brains: focused, compassionate attention.